Welcome to Hot Topic. This week I'm talking to Luke Broughton about the rehabilitation of ex-offenders. Luke, thank you very much for coming in today. This is obviously an extremely serious issue, and there are various ideas being in the news at the moment about prison reform and the rehabilitation of offenders. What is it that stands out for you in these conversations?
Prison rehabilitation, obviously it's a big passionate subject of mine. Prison rehabilitation to me, obviously, as part of my job, it's to me, rehabilitation starts from society, from outside the prison gates. That's my main focus. It's to support picking up inmates from the gates and supporting from outside of their prison sentence, and obviously impacting on looking at people's lives in the first instance, why people offend. That's my topic area.
You have, I mean, I hope you'll forgive me for bringing this up, and it is a little personal, but you have personal experience of the system, as it were, don't you?
Yeah.
Just tell us your story.
I was obviously involved as a young child in antisocial behaviour, substance taking, disengaged with the school environment, always felt unachieved, started hanging around with the wrong peers, so older generation, which, as you know, there was, well, you won't know, but with the older generation, started getting involved with substance misuse at a very early age of 14, hanging around with the New Age Travellers they used to have the buses in the 90s, hanging around with them at 14 years old. And obviously when I'm embroiled in drug use back then, I started stealing from a habit. So,
which drugs were you involved in?
It would be ecstasy, LSD, cannabis. Started off with cannabis, obviously progresses. Amphetamines, and obviously then stealing to fund my habit with petty crime, and that was the start of sort of my criminal sort of lifestyle, and then started trying to come away from the drug use at about 17 years old. Started drinking alcohol, trying to work, trying to drink alcohol, breaking away from the drug scene. Couldn't handle the drink too much, always grew up around violence, so to speak. And sort of alcohol-related violence started creeping in. So I'd gone from stealing to sort of violence, and then kind of making a bit of a name for myself. And that violence becomes worse and worse because you have to always carry on with that violence.
You were a bit of a tough lad, were you?
Not necessarily, just thinking I was, so to speak. And then end up in the prison system on the first sentence, involved in alcohol-related violence. Ended up serving my first prison sentence at 17.
How long was that sentence?
That was only a 7-month sentence. I say only, it was bad enough when you're 17 years old. It's quite a scary world when you go in for your first sentence.
Which prison was that in? Which category of prison?
Hull Edham Road. I stayed for the full sentence at Edham Road.
And that's a maximum security prison?
That was a dispersal prison. So it was obviously allocate there and then transfer you on, but luckily, because it was a short sentence, got to stay there, which is close to family, which was better. But yeah, and then obviously getting out of prison, had a lot of thought about my life while I was in prison. As a young kid, you're thinking about your life, thinking about your future, and then get out of the prison system, and there was nobody there to sort of support me. So then I'm back in my own life, my own world, got a bit more of a reputation, and I'm just stuck in that cycle of reoffending. And then I ended up...
So you were stuck in that cycle of reoffending?
Yeah, I say were. I'm not now. Yeah, it's
yeah.
very historic. And then obviously the violence, again, alcohol-related violence, ended up serving, getting a 2.5-year sentence for alcohol-related violence, and then going back into the prison system a year later. But then in that prison system found education. So obviously they had a social science department in higher education. And the only reason I walked into it in the first instance was because I was a young offender, and this class had adults in, so it was the cons, as you refer to them. And so I looked through the door, and I seen these adults sat there, and it was a mature environment. It wasn't hectic like the one I was in doing basic skills in the prison system. So I liked the idea of it, and I asked if I could just sit in and just take notice, and sat in that class and encouraged to write my first essay by a good gentleman who was a lecturer. And from that first essay I got given a bit of confidence, seen something in that essay and kind of give me a bit of belief, which I never had at school.
which prison was this second sentence
This
served
was
in?
Hull Prison again, Headham Road. And it was that belief from that first essay that spurred me on to study more.
Both of these sentences were served in adult prisons?
Yeah.
So the education system that's applied in prison, that was your salvation, as it were?
It was, yeah. It was that and the belief from the lecturer. I'd always grew up in school where teachers weren't really, there was no sort of nurturing, it's like you was forgot about. You'd caused a bit of trouble, you was isolated, you was labelled as that bad kid. So I had something in me, but nobody could bring it out. And this great teacher, I say great lecturer, he found it and brought it out. And went back for a third sentence to study again, alcohol-related violence yet again.
It sounds, I know it's just the way you put it, but you went back for a third sentence to study again. It wasn't your intention to get back into prison for the academic opportunities it offers.
No, not all. But yeah, found myself going back to prison for the third time.
Alcohol-related violence?
Alcohol-related violence. That same scenario, no support, no nothing. You was left at the prison gates, you had your bag, you had your money, and you was left and there was no pick you up, no support. Probation service were busy enough. There was no guidance from anybody. So you're back to your old life. So obviously reoffending.
How long was that third sentence?
That third sentence was 15 months, served 7.5. Back in Headham Road and back into my social science class, like I'd never been away. And obviously started studying again. They'd just started the degrees in the prison then, because before it was A-levels, they'd just incorporated the degree through Hull University, and it was that degree. I just started that degree, and then just before, as it was just starting, I could never finish it because it was a short-term sentence. Never knew what to do when I was released because I had no guidance. So I'd left with quite a bit of education, lots of certificates of guidance, psychology, anthropology, etc. And then when I was released, it wasn't up until 6 years before I was told you can go to university on the outside, higher education, and be funded by student finance. So I was left for 6 years, still living a little bit of a life how I was, but trying, my best to get out of it. But it was 6 years down the line before I got told I could go and better myself at university. It was alien to me, never knew.
So in between your second and third sentences, you'd started studying during your second sentence, but when you came out after that sentence, there was no opportunity for you to continue those studies on the outside. No. Then in your third sentence, you could restart your studies, but then on coming out again, it was 6 years before anybody made you aware of the opportunity, that there was the opportunity to go on and complete your degree.
And I would say because there was no support services when I was going through this.
When was this? When were you released?
2002 was my first sentence. I was released 1998. Then my second sentence I was released 2000, sorry, and then my third sentence I was released 2002. But there was no support services. There was nothing there. It was go see your probation officer, and that was it. There was no pickup, no support, no guidance. So you was left to your own devices. Because the thing is when you was in prison, the amount of thought you had about your life, how much you wanted to change, how much you wanted to get out of the cycle and break the cycle of reoffending, you come out with all this motivation, but if nobody's there to pick you up and support you, then obviously that motivation diminishes quite fast.
It's been that, in that case, I guess it's been since 2002. It's been 14 years since you've been in the courts.
Yes. Yeah.
And don't make any confessions here that you're going to regret. But 14 years since you've been involved in any criminal activity.
Yeah.
And it is only one example, so we can't universalise from the particular. But would you say that it was that academic and that educational opportunity that's been your salvation?
It has. I believe in education. I kind of look back and think I kind of thank that I went to the prison system in that sense, because it did save me, and I'm glad I walked into that class and looked through that door. Because it did save me, because my life would have just been the same continuously. Maybe one day, you never know, you could have changed your life around, but at that time I wouldn't. It was quite a difficult life.
Would you say that your experience is common, that a lot of offenders find that surprised by that opportunity and take it up?
It is very common, as in finding, having hope, trying to move forward and realising that there's no support out there. It's very common. I see it with the clients I work with today. They come out with so many qualifications, training, bricklaying qualifications, etc. And they come out with a lot of hope, and until our project's been running, I must say, come out with a lot of hope, and it was deemed as doomed, like the life was still going to be the same. So you don't have that hope, you have that motivation to change, but nobody there to help you.
Luke, we'll take it on after the break. Please join us again in a couple of minutes. I'm talking to Luke Broughton about the... Sorry, Erica, I forgot to say hello again. Okay. Welcome back. I'm talking to Luke Broughton about the rehabilitation of ex-offenders. Luke, you've just told us your story, which is rather admirable in a way. I mean, it's almost like a classic Greek plot of Nadia and redemption and returning to discovering herself. Is the academic route that you took the only route, the only way by which people within the prison system can find a purpose and find a future for themselves?
Not necessarily, no. It's academic. Obviously, a large proportion of the prison population have quite low academic skills. There's also, you know, you've got the plastering qualifications, Humber prison itself. There's a lot of good training goes on within the Humber prison. So ex-offenders can walk out with plastering qualifications, bricklaying qualifications, all manners of training, depending suited to the needs you want.
Not locksmithery?
No,
Okay.
maybe. Or could well be, because Timpsons are quite...
Well, yes,
Yeah.
and that company has a specific policy of employing former offenders, doesn't it?
And a very successful approach.
And about a quarter of their workforce.
That's right, yeah. And the reoffending rates are excellent.
Yeah.
The recidivism rates, are excellent.
So all sorts of other things are available for prisoners there that not only give them a possibility of a future, but give them an economic future as well. If you learn a trade, then you've got something that you can do to earn yourself money when you come out.
Yeah.
But take me then to that moment when you come out for the last day of your sentence. You come out through the prison gates with a coat over your arm and a suitcase in one hand, and then an officer says, "Good luck," presumably. Who's there to meet you? What happens then?
There's nobody there to pick you up. I'm a big believer of through the gate. There's nobody there to pick you up for the support side. Obviously, you may have family, friends, may need to get the bus yourself or the train yourself.
When you say a big believer in through the gate, what's
through the gate
through the gate?
It's support within the prison system. It's an idea of support within the prison system. Pick people up from the gate, support them in the gate, make sure everything's secure, like you've got your ID, you've got your bank account set up, you've got your housing sorted out, everything's set up, that your basics of what you need to move forward. And then somebody pick you up when you're released and take you to your first appointment to the probation, and then support you from day one and make your appointments and keep that motivation going that you come out with. Because the majority of inmates will walk out of prison with so much thought about moving forward in life, but that needs to be harnessed, because you've got a short period of time before that'll then diminish, and then reoffending can reoccur, hence the revolving door again.
I mean, there are just the simple practicalities as you come out. I mean, where do you sleep that night? Where do you go and find a meal? You've spent several months or years where one thing you haven't had to worry about is a square meal and a bed to sleep in. So what's the solution to that? I mean, how do you find those answers?
Most people go out to family, friends, they'll have their own places. You do get a large proportion that obviously are homeless, which then will be put into the hostels, probation hostels, so the meal side will be taken care of. It's more so much the plan, the journey to reform, so to speak, which is the big key point. Most people will have a place, whether it is, as you say, probation or their own places.
Now, you're working on the Empowering Project,
Yeah.
Which is run by a company called OnGo.
Yeah.
Tell me about the Empowering Project. What exactly are you doing? You're an employment coach.
I'm an employment coach, and my job is to support anybody with a criminal conviction, so persons with convictions, into employment by addressing barriers they face, whether that be just the simplistic things as not having a CV, email address, bank accounts, which are very important. If you're going to get employment, you need a bank account. Looking at all the little, as we say, the five, the bank account, the CV, the cover letters, the email address, and obviously set your job seekers claim up, make sure everything's addressed there, and then start assessing and creating an action plan geared around the barriers people face. So if somebody say they haven't got no training, then obviously we need to be looking at training. Somebody's got substance issues, then we need to be looking at signposting to the relevant agency to support that. And it's just providing that network of support to make sure all that ambition can be harnessed and fulfilled.
There would be those who say that in any capitalist economy there is a proportion of unemployment, because there has to be to have maybe 2 or 3%, because that means that there is an employment labour market. And there might be those who say that if there has to be a small amount of unemployment, then it's better that the people who have committed crimes are the ones who don't get jobs, and those who haven't ever committed a crime, have never been violent, have never stolen anything, that they shouldn't be kept out of employment by somebody who has been wicked taking that job.
I totally understand why people would say that. However, everybody is entitled to change. So everybody's entitled to their own life, everybody's entitled to move away from their criminal activity and rebuild their own life. Circumstances in life that can direct people down the wrong path. It can happen to most people. Doesn't mean it's anybody's fault, as long as they take responsibility and move forward in life.
Suggest that maybe if a crime is committed, it is somebody's fault, it's the criminal's fault.
Yeah, well, yeah, but there's social factors in life that can direct somebody down a path which can impact upon their personal life. It's one of them subjects what got to kind of lived it to see it, or see it to see what I'm on about. It's like brought up in violent households, not having them social skills to adapt in life. Coming in a worklessness family. I'm not saying every single person that comes from worklessness family will go on to offend, because that doesn't happen, but I'm saying there are factors in life that can direct somebody down the path they don't want to necessarily go down.
If the crime is caused not by the responsibility or the decision of the criminal, but by those factors external to the criminal, to the committer of the crime, then is it appropriate to punish that criminal at all, or the person who commits a crime? Is it appropriate to punish them at all if they do it for reasons that are out with their control? Everybody
has to be responsible for their own actions, and that's I'm not saying that everybody has to be responsible for their own actions. You commit a crime, you have to be responsible for that. But what my point is when we're leading back to what we're saying about why should somebody with criminal convictions have the right to employment over somebody without employment, it's just leading back to that. There's other factors that can determine why somebody goes down a different path. But my basic point is we're all human. We're all entitled to the life of employment and to move forward without being discriminated against.
I just want to go through the usual reasons that people, that criminologists or that lawyers or that even philosophers would give for locking people up, for punishing by imprisonment, are prevention, first of all, that they want, if this is what several Home Secretaries have said, Michael Howard especially, if you lock people up, they're behind bars, they can't be out there committing crime. Well, then that's in a way locking them up for the sake of crimes that haven't been committed, not locking them up for what they've already done, or for deterrence, to stop. If you know that you're going to be locked up if you commit a crime, well, again, that's locking somebody up for the sake of crimes that other people might have committed and might not yet have committed, or it's the possibility of rehabilitation or re-education. To change that person from a bad person into a good person, well, again, that's locking somebody up for the sake of something that they might be in the future, or they might be or might not be in the future. So in a way, the only logical justification for locking people up is just plain old eye for an eye, retributive justice. If you do something bad should happen to you. Is that an argument that flies?
Which leading back to the first conversation we had just a minute ago about why offenders shouldn't have the right for employment over somebody else. I mean, prison is the punishment. So when you're sentenced, prison is the actual punishment. The punishment in later on in life in society, the punishment should be the sentence. Everybody should have the right to then have a life because you've been punished for your mistake. And if you refer back to what you said, can you say that again, sorry?
No, not at all. I was just saying that it's difficult to work out why it is that society locks people up, if that's consistent with justice. What the precise reasons for those are, other than just that retribution. And I think you've expressed it very well when you talk about that responsibility being taken. But that if that's the case, that one is being punished purely retributively, that the purpose of the prison system can't logically be rehabilitation or deterrence or just to keep you off the streets, unless you're bringing in some other social engineering philosophy behind it as well. But if it is purely a matter of retribution, then is that appropriate if the reason people commit crimes are for reasons that are not their own responsibility, that are factors from behind them? But Luke, forgive me, I think you've answered the question.
It's not appropriate. Because obviously retribution, it's not the answer. The answer is addressing the problems that's arisen. So the reason why people reoffend, setting up projects, setting up employment outcomes so people can go and have that life, to steer them away from offending, that's would be better than the retribution side.
And Luke, we'll come to that in a moment. Come back in a minute. Welcome back. I'm still talking to Luke Broughton, Employment Project employment coach, talking about the rehabilitation of, well, are we going to call them ex-offenders, old lags, retired criminals?
Convictions.
Persons with
convictions.
convictions.
Will be fine. Ex-offenders will be fine.
I hope we all have convictions in one sense or another. We were talking just before the break about the possibility that prison isn't really an appropriate punishment for the reasons that we discussed, other than as a retributive punishment, which might not be appropriate to people who can't really be expected to be responsible for their own actions, in a sense. External factors dictate their behaviour more than their own autonomy, as it were. So what's the alternative if it's not prison?
I wouldn't say not responsible for their own actions, because they are responsible for their own actions. What I say is there's social factors that can change somebody's life to go down a different path. And I say that as in not having the social skills other people have, not having the work ethic other people have, not having the being around aggression and just brought up in aggressive households. It's that sort of life that can divert somebody down a different path.
That there is nurture as nature is,
nurture, the nurture-nature debate.
But anyway, if that's the case, prison might, you would suggest, not necessarily be an appropriate form of penalty, of punishment for committing crimes. What's the alternative?
Prison's needed, because obviously people need to be punished. But what my argument is there needs to be an appropriate network of support available to enable somebody to come out of prison and move forward in life. I believe obviously support has to start within prison, and emphasis needs to be towards that. But then more emphasis needs to be on picking offenders up in the community and supporting them in the community, especially while their motivations are very high. And that's where all the work begins, is in the community. There's a lot of work goes on within the prison system, but a lot of it needs to be done in the community.
I want to just go to those causes of crime. I hate paraphrasing Tony Blair when he was leader of the opposition and Shadow Home Secretary. It's a very old phrase now, tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. It seems so trite and glib now. But those causes of crime, one of those causes of crime is that so many things are against the law. If you make, the more things you make against the law, the more crimes are going to be committed by definition. Now, one of the big categories of our criminal legal statute book is the laws against drugs. You said that you got into your own troublesome early youth through taking drugs, moving from one to another. If drugs were regulated to be sold like alcohol or tobacco, not to young children, a little bit of VAT stuck on them, and certain standards put on them in terms of purity and not being cut with anything poisonous and horrible, drugs are something that you take into your own body voluntarily. You're not hurting somebody else. And if you are, because you have to steal money to get those drugs, it's because you have to steal the money to get those drugs because they're illegal, which is what makes them expensive. Is there not an argument for just legalising drugs and saying, if you want to take heroin, it's not going to do you any good, but it's not ours to tell you not to.
In my opinion, I've seen so many lives damaged through drugs. I wouldn't personally want to see drugs legalised, because I've seen lives destroyed by drugs. I get the argument, I understand the argument to the reasons, to obviously...
It's just that so many criminals are involved in drugs. It costs such a lot of time and money and treasure and heartache to police it. It's a war that people talk about, the war on drugs, again, awful phrase, but if it is a war, we're losing it. And it's cost an awful lot of people to lock people up. So it's almost a selfish thing for those who don't take drugs, is to say, well, we're not going to try to stop you anymore.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, going back to myself, I personally, I've seen lives damaged. Drugs were one of the stepping stones to my life being destroyed. Starting drugs at such a young age, while your brain's still developing, such a young age, and then getting involved with just, as people say, just cannabis, which then led me on to take more and more harder drugs, which then started destroying my life. And although I
think those who would advocate the liberalisation of these laws would say that, you know, there's a cut, you can't, like alcohol and tobacco, 16 or 18, you can't get your hands on it, or you can't legally get your hands on it as a child, and that would still be policed and prevented where possible.
Yeah, as personally, my opinion, I personally wouldn't like to see them legalised, and that's just my opinion.
Well, it's your opinion is, well, you have some authority to give it. There are other things then that also ruin lives that are perfectly legal. There is alcohol, which can ruin lives, and which is legal but not given to the young. But there's also driving without wearing your glasses can ruin somebody else's life. Now, would you make these things illegal as well? Because it sounds as if you're bringing in a sort of a prohibition kind of attitude.
I don't have the control, and I've never had the control for that. But as alcohol,
this is a democracy.
I've always said that alcohol's one of the. I rarely have a drink to my mouth. Alcohol is one of the most dangerous substances out there. Destroys the most lives. Is a bigger hindrance on the NHS bill. Obviously, it's legal. I can't change that. Nothing. Just have to accept it. I'm just going on the substance side, the drug side. I just seen too many lives destroyed, too many people lose their lives. That I personally, through experience, wouldn't like to see it legalised. I know it's not going to ever combat the issue because people will find drugs, people will use. But I believe education's probably a better way forward. Trying to educate young children from a young age to move forward away from substances. Education's always the key, and I believe more emphasis needs to be put on that rather than banning this and banning that. Education is probably more of a better way forward.
Well, prison is what provided you with your education and inspired you to go on. Give me some of the successes that you've had in your empowering projects as people have come out. What results do you tend to get?
It's been brilliant. It's obviously we work with offenders, from prolific offenders to people with just a caution on the conviction, caution on the record. So it doesn't matter. We don't discriminate over offences. And we've had some brilliant successes. We've moved 512 offenders into employment since 2012. Sustained employment. Supported 174, 512 ex-offenders over a period from 2012 to present. We've moved 174 into employment, 10 into university. One actually graduates from social science degree this year at Lincoln University, which is brilliant. I can't wait for that. Employment varies from low skilled to we sort of set up somebody, we say to somebody, what do you want to be? If you could choose a career path, what would you like to be? Rather than forcing somebody to do something they don't want to do. And we chase that goal. For instance, I've got an ex-serviceman, ex-military, come through the system, got on heroin, been years in the army, got on heroin, struggled with life and just destroyed his family network, destroyed his life, come through very distraught, very within himself, very destroyed. We used volunteering to sort of motivate him, moving forward, give him confidence, link up with SAFA, Civvy Street, other organisations that support ex-military, supported him to get his forklift licence, supported him into forklift licence,
yes.
Supported him into employment. Now, after we'd worked with him for several times, he was thinking like like he used to be, thinking different. And he stayed in for a year, and he saved up most of his money, and he saved up for a year, and he paid for his own HGV lessons, and then he got his job as a HGV driver, which is a brilliant story. This is a gentleman who society give up on, but we pick him up and we support him. Many people would see, you know, a heroin user, blah blah blah, wouldn't want to pick him up. We pick him up, we help him, we bring the best out of him, and he goes on and fulfills his potential. And as David Cameron says, harnessed his potential. And we've got stories like this all the time. We've got people over 3 years been working. Somebody come out of prison for got IPP'd. Minimum tariff of a life sentence. Had to you have to prove your worth to be released. You can get a minimum tariff of say 3 months. But you can stay in there for 11 years, and if they see fit to let you out, I think they've abolished it now, if I remember rightly. Very bad reputation. He's been working for 3 years now. He's been supported, we've shown him some belief, we've helped him, supported him into that employment role, and now he's fulfilling his potential, and he's away from the life he was once living, and he was costing the taxpayer a lot of money.
You mentioned all these stories that you tell. The pronoun is always he. Is it very much a male?
Yes, sorry about
prison
that.
Population?
No, sorry about that. Forgive me for that.
No, sorry, I'm just asking.
We do have females through the door, although referral-wise, not as many females as we do males. Very few come through my door for the project I work with, ex-offenders. I've got a lady on my client list now who graduates from university this year, September, from Lincoln University. She's just finishing off her 3rd year, and she graduates. And she was referred from probation. She used to attend the women's group at probation. She was referred over and obviously supported, nurtured her potential, give her a belief that she can go achieve something, and she's accessed higher education and is thriving.
And of course, you talk about referrals there. People can refer themselves to your service.
Yeah, it's self-referral as well. We take referrals from we have strong contacts with the Humber, the prison on the Humber,
yep.
Headham Road, other local establishments, Hatfield, etc. So anybody released into the local community, we can take referrals from the prison system. We take them from the Department of Work and Pensions. Obviously, self-referral.
We'll go through how that system works
Yeah.
in a moment. We must stop there. Welcome back. For the last part of Hot Topic, I'm talking to Luke Broughton, the employment coach at Empowering Project, which seeks to provide work for people coming out of prison. Luke, you talked a moment ago, you told a story about one of your clients, I suppose, if that's the right word, who came out of the army before finding himself with a problem with heroin and then offending. Now, we have a large number of our ex-servicemen finding themselves troubling the courts. Including with drugs. And very often these are people who have been traumatized by experiences in the several wars that this country has been fighting across the world in the last decade and a half or so. What on earth can be done, especially to help people who have put their necks on the line?
The right sort of support. As I said, referring back to before, when we had the question before about why should somebody with criminal convictions be allowed to sort of move into employment over the community, ex-offenders being one of them. People are quite passionate about ex-offenders. They've offended like anybody else. But what needs to be done is the support, pick them up, support them. These people, these individuals have gone through, some of them, gone through traumatic times. Those that have done tour, suffer from PTSD. They seem to come out of the army and they seem to just left on the streets with no support. There's no help for anybody other than the great work SAFA, Civvy Street do, but they have to be referred there or know about SAFA and Civvy Street, which the right information and guidance is not getting given. So people aren't aware that the clients, I do get a lot of referrals, and there's a lot of ex-military with PTSD. I had another one this week. And the mental health issues alone are quite shocking from them because they've never been supported around that. And they've been on job seekers for a long time and nobody's ever guided them to the route of SAFA, Civvy Street, who can provide that intervention. believe they need supporting. These are people that was brought up, they was trained a different way, they was trained not to function in society, so to speak, they was trained for combat, effectively. And then when they're put out in civilian life, they're not that good at adapting to civilian life. They're not used to this. And coupled with the mental health problems through the PTSD, etc., it's a disastrous combination.
Well, is there not almost a similarity and analogy? Perhaps you should have a sister organisation for people coming out of the forces. And if you've had a very structured, disciplined lifestyle where your infrastructure of your life, as it were, is provided, your accommodation, your food, what you do every day, and that you do have this tremendous self-discipline, and not to mention the courage, but the self-discipline and the skill and the training that one does have when one comes out of the armed forces. It's almost as if it's almost in the same position as somebody coming out of prison, in that all of a sudden you're no longer part of a community, you're no longer part of an institution. Is there not an argument that you should be working with the former service people as well, who haven't committed a crime?
Yeah, I mean, there's organisations out there that will do. SAFA Civvy Street, they don't just work with people with convictions. Us as a project, we work with people with convictions. Part of my project, obviously, as an organisation, as a company, we support people without convictions. The same role I do, but I just pick up the people with convictions. We have we call it Employment Support Team through ONGO, and obviously the team support the community, and then I just work on the ex-offender programme. So there's help for everybody.
There's an economic aspect to your work as well, I suppose, apart from providing an income for the people who you help and who you help into employment. That saves everybody else a bit of money, I guess, does it?
Very, yeah. As a company, and I refer back to the employment support team, I work with the community and myself with the ex-offender programme. As a company as a whole, last year, we saved the economy on a social investment and return we had written. We'd saved the economy £3.1 million.
So that's money that would otherwise, if those people hadn't got jobs, that's money that otherwise would have been spent on social security or on locking them up again if they'd
yeah,
gone.
on
if
prison cost, on medication, on job seekers, hospital bills, locking up in the police station, all the costs associated with people being unemployed or offending. Very good figure.
Who pays for your organisation? How is it financed?
It's ONGO Homes. So ONGO is a housing provider in North Lincolnshire. But we take our referrals. We was funded originally. We started off based at Crosby Employment Bureau. Crosby Employment Bureau applied for funding through the DWP, Department of Work and Pensions, which gave us a small grant of 40,000, I believe, £40,000 to work with 120 ex-offenders with a minimal target of so many into employment at the end of that. I can't remember the figure, this was 4 years ago. From then, obviously, we got funded again by Job Centre because we achieved our targets, and it was proving beneficial to the Job Centre in Scunthorpe because people that was long-term unemployed was actually in employment. And so it was proven to work. So then we was funded again. That went 3 separate times, funded by the Job Centre, and now we received, the Empowering Project alone receives its funding from the SSE fund, which is the wind turbines up in Scunthorpe,
yes.
The company that, SSE fund.
Everything around here is involved in wind turbines one way or another.
Yes, now they like to do a lot in the community as part of putting their turbines up, so they've spotted the project and realised the benefits of it, and they've funded money to run that project and adhere to them targets, which we've achieved.
There's a certain amount of policy discussion within the Home Office and the Department of Justice about reforms to the ways prisons are run. There's a suggestion that they should be really quite independent institutions, rather along the lines of the school academies, schools becoming academies. Is that a successful idea?
Has its plus sides, and it will have its, in my opinion, has its plus sides, and it will have its negative sides. Obviously, school academies, is it 44% of school academies are failing or failed, which doesn't look good for the prison system. I think as well, when you try and look towards a prisoner's academy, we're dealing with prisoners, offenders, different type of people, not dealing with school children. However, it does have its plus sides because league table results, payment by results as academies go, payment by results, that can be beneficial for the fact of you have to gain these results to be able to be successful in your funding, if I believe I'm on the right track.
But surely it's the prisons that have the worst results and the greatest rates of recidivism that need the most money.
Yeah. It's not so much the prison system that's, I believe, in my opinion, it's not so much the prison system that's failing because they have enough opportunities in there, i.e. education, training, bricklaying qualifications. It's what happens outside. It's the support services outside that cuts in cost of the support service. Social enterprises cut costs into air funding there. It's the support service outside that pick people up with these qualifications, etc., and then can support them and mentor them down that road.
Were they then to be like academies and have that sort of results-based financing? Would that not be an incentive to prisons and an incentive to governors to provide, as part of the service they provide, aftercare for the people that their guests on release?
I would say if you're in a league table system, in academy system, you would have to make sure systems are set up so to enable offenders to move forward and not re-offend, because it'll impact upon them as a whole, the governor as a whole.
One of the other ideas, perhaps not quite as extreme as the Academy's model for prisons, is this governor discretion, which means that each governor can run the prison with perhaps completely differing philosophies of penal thought in completely different prisons.
Yeah, in my opinion, if governors are given autonomy over how they see fit to run the prison, freedom to run the prison how they wish to run the prison. You have some people that believe strongly in punishment. You have some people that believe in rehabilitation. So if you have a governor who believes strongly towards punishment, then the whole idea, as David Cameron's talked about, the whole idea about rehabilitation can have detrimental impact, because obviously a governor believes more towards punishment.
But is it the case now that some governors with different philosophies can run their prisons differently? I ask because it seems that if we're all equal before the law, that when one's sentenced, it shouldn't just be a matter of chance that you're going to have a particular harsh regime or perhaps a slightly more positive regime, that it's a matter of chance of which experience of prison you get. Because if we are equal before the law, there should be one blanket universal experience across the whole jurisdiction.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe. I mean, I've only ever experienced myself. I've only ever experienced, two prisons, and there was both of them pretty much similar.
Join me again next week. If you have anything to say about prisoner rehabilitation or the way the prisons are run, then please join in the discussion on Twitter. But until next week, from Hot Topic, goodbye.